right, so let's talk about network forensics. And so network forensics is where you analyze network traffic to see what's been going on. And this is, of course, very important for incident response. This is often how you start. You have some kind of intrusion detection system that warns you that something bad is happening on your network, or one of your machines is doing something suspicious, and that's how you get started. And analyzing network traffic is often what you use. So there's quite a few devices here. Is there any plan to have a pen test class only? Well, that's what 123 and 124 are. 123 and 124 are the pen testing classes. Ethical hacking and advanced ethical hacking. Anyway, so proxy servers are servers that sit between you and the internet. So when your users go to the internet, they do not go directly to internet web pages. They go to the proxy, which fetches web pages on their behalf, and therefore the proxy can block traffic you don't want, like porn and no malicious traffic. And there's quite a few commercial tools used to monitor the network up here, like TCP dump and Wireshark to capture traffic, and Scapy can create network traffic, and there's a lot of other tools here that are used to examine network traffic requests. So web servers store web pages and serve them up in response to client requests. The Uniform Resource Identifier is this up here. It is the specification of exactly what page you're loading. ccsf.instructure.com/courses and so on. That whole thing is called a URI. When you send an HTTP or an HTTPS request to the web, you get a response from the server. The first thing it sends back is a code, a number, to say whether it worked. 200 means your request succeeded. The server was able to understand your request and it is providing the requested data. 100 means just an informational message. 300 means the server understood your request, but it is redirecting you somewhere else to get the answer. And 400 and 500 are errors. There are scripting languages like Python, PHP, Perl, used to process requests. So you can have your request handled by something more complicated than a web server that would simply hand up the data you asked for or say it can't find it. You can use a script which will then process things like a username and password and decide if they're correct. DHCP distributes IP addresses to all the devices as they boot up. This is what's typically used on endpoints like laptops. And this is a problem for network forensic investigation because it means if you have a laptop that boots up, it gets an IP address temporarily, but tomorrow a different laptop might have the same IP address. So when you look in the logs, there is a problem figuring out which actual physical device was being connected. So you have to have DHCP logs to record what MAC address it assigned that IP address to if you want to figure out which actual physical computer was being used. Email servers, of course, send and receive email using a variety of protocols. DNS servers resolve alphabetic domain names like ccsf.edu to numerical IP addresses, and this must be used for essentially all internet traffic. Routers connect the networks together. Switches connect devices on one network. Hubs are almost extinct. They were a device before switches were developed. There were hubs that just electrically connected all the devices together, so every signal sent by one device was repeated to all the other devices. Modern wireless networks still work that way because there's no way to direct the wireless traffic to just one device, so it goes to every device. And IDS, or intrusion detection systems, as I mentioned, this is like network antivirus. It monitors the network traffic and it looks for a list of known suspicious or malicious activities on the network and then takes an action like sending up an alert or perhaps even blocking something that it regards as malicious. And firewalls limit the traffic on a network by having some rules which specify certain traffic is permitted and other traffic is blocked. Now, there's other things. PGP is strong encryption. You can use an email, and you can also encrypt hard drives with it. IP version 4 is the older and more common system that has IP addresses. Let me just bring up a command line here, terminal. All right, so if I do ifconfig on a Mac, they're still using the old deprecated technique. All right, if I do just my Ethernet, which is my wireless, which is EN0, all right. So here, you see my IP addresses. This is my MAC address, which is 48 bits long, 6 bytes, And here is the Internet version 4 address, which is 4 base 10 numbers separated by dots. Each one of them is representing an 8-bit binary number, so it goes from 0 to 255. That's IP version 4. IP version 6 uses this much longer hexadecimal address. It's 4 times longer than IP version 4 because we ran out of IP version 4 addresses. And so we're all in the process of converting to IP version 6. Now it's up to something like 20% of all internet traffic is going over IP version 6, and that will gradually increase. All right. Why we should not record live network traffic with Wireshark. Yes, the problem is that Wireshark is designed to make it easy to analyze protocols. And it has protocol dissectors that understand almost every possible network protocol, thousands of them, and those are written by just sort of community members. They are not carefully vetted for security. So there are security flaws in Wireshark that if you're sniffing live network traffic, there are ways to take over your machine through the Wireshark. That's why it is not recommended to use Wireshark to monitor live network traffic. What's better is to use a program like TCP-dump, which is a command line tool to record the network traffic and use Wireshark to analyze it later. That's more recommended. It's a very good question and an important issue. All right, subnetting is splitting a network up into chunks, which is done to separate traffic for either security or performance reasons. There are ports, TCP and UDP ports control the traffic just to guide it, so your web servers might be listening on port 80 or 443, and your email on port 25, and so on. This is just a way for one IP address to have many different services. You have many different processes running on the machine, and each listening on different ports, and the ports just sort the traffic like mailboxes. The OSI and TCP models are conceptual models used to organize this traffic, and the most, let me bring up Wireshark, that's the easiest way to understand it. Okay, so if I sniff on my local adapter, I say I'm going to do it, even though I say it's not a good security measure, I'll sniff for a little while, that's enough. All right, so here's some traffic, and this is a real-time message protocol. I think this is my Twitch traffic. This is my streaming traffic. So if you look at RTMP, you'll see real-time messaging protocol down here. And this is what I'm saying. Wireshark has protocol dissectors. Somebody wrote a dissector for RTMP, which is not a super common protocol, but they wrote a dissector. We'll show you all the specifications of how this thing is built. Anyway, here you can see the OSI model. This packet here has 1,514 bytes. That's the actual physical traffic. Then at layer 2 of the OSI model is Ethernet, which has MAC addresses. At layer 3, it's IP, which has IP addresses. And at layer 4, it has TCP, which has ports, a source port of 61,939 and a destination port of 1935. So this is where you see the first 4 layers of the OSI model. You have the layer 1 is the physical signals sent over a wire or radio. Layer 2 uses MAC addresses. Layer 3 uses IP addresses, and layer 4 uses TCP or UDP ports. And there are some layers above that, 5, 6, and 7, but they're pretty much all mixed together and implemented by your browser. The first 4 layers are the ones that really have a strong physical correlation with hardware. Yeah?
So this is OSI, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to, the OSI model, yeah. In the TCP model, they combine the first 2 layers, and then second, these 2 are the same. They just have a smaller number of layers. And these are the 4 layers that really matter, that really have clear meaning. They have different addressing. 5, 6, and 7 pretty much blur together in practice.
So Wireshark only captures the OSI layer?
Wireshark captures the entire packets, and then it dissects it to make it easier to understand. And it does dissect it all the way up. Like, for example, this is probably layer 7 down here, real-time messaging protocol. And if I have HTTP, I may not have any. I don't. But anyway, yeah, it'll dissect any kind of packet. Wireshark just tries to lay it out to make it easier to understand. But it's recorded. The entire packet is down here in hexadecimal. You got the whole thing. So if you record data with Wireshark, you have the whole network traffic, and you can reconstruct the images and web pages and everything from it. Except, of course, that it's often encrypted, and you may not have the key. All right. Anyway, that's a simple overview of the OSI model. All right, and so then there's instant response. which is a branch, it's somewhat different than computer forensics, but it is closely related. Incident response is often why you are looking on a network for traffic. You're trying to analyze an attack in progress. So the Security Operations Center is monitoring your traffic, and it has these big displays showing alerts and levels of traffic flow and so on, and they're watching. This is what Homer Simpson does in the Simpsons cartoon. He's at a nuclear plant watching this board to see if bad things are happening. That's his Security Operations Center. And so this is also how a lot of beginning people in computer security get their job. Security analyst jobs are where beginners often start, which you'll be on the night shift in a SOC, monitoring, looking for alerts. It's pretty boring, and this is how you prove that you can be relied on and you obey orders and stuff. You sit there waiting for things to happen, and when they happen, you've been told, if this happens, do that. If this happens, do that. If anything else happens, call them to layer 2. So you do the first response, and and that's where a lot of students start, and you can get these jobs. If you go to Pacific Hackers, the meetup in San Jose, they always have jobs available for SOC analysts. So if you need a job and you're trying to break into security, that's often where you start. Anyway, so this is threat intelligence is used more often these days. Threat intelligence, you typically subscribe to a feed, and they analyze what the criminals are doing and tell you what IP addresses they're using, what kind of attacks they're doing, what malware they're using, and often have an automatic update into your defense systems, so it will help watch for the current threats and even the current threats relevant to your industry, and try to help be more effective for that reason. And so advanced persistent threats are most commonly enemy military. These are the really dangerous attackers that have really powerful tools which typically can blast right through all your defenses. Your antivirus and your intrusion detection system and all that will not stop it, because they have researchers who can develop 0 days, new attacks, and you pretty much can't stop them. There's a quote from Bruce Schneier I saw recently, a famous cryptographer, and he said, "You cannot protect, you cannot defend, you cannot prevent. What you have to do is detect and respond." And that's what the current situation is. You can prevent some attacks. Things like firewalls and antivirus will stop certain attackers, but those are the low-level, unskilled attackers. The advanced persistent threat attackers are too powerful, and your defenses will not stop them, so they will get through and infect machines on your network, and you have to understand that, and you have to detect it and respond to it. Which is nothing new. For example, consider physical crime. How do you know that your employees are not physically stealing company property? The fact is, people do that, and you cannot completely prevent it. So you have to have responses. Sometimes people do steal money and other products from their company, and you have to detect it and respond to it when it happens. You can't pretend that some kind of defense means that will never happen. All right, so those are the APTs, and so there's the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain is one of the early attempts to organize this, where you have reconnaissance, where they investigate your company from the outside to decide what kind of attacks they might want to do. Then they prepare some kind of weapon, deliver it, perform an exploit where they take over control of some portion of your company, and then they have an infected machine that is calling back to a command and control server to be under enemy control, and then they exfiltrate data, whatever they've stolen from you. That is one of the many ways to sort of organize your thinking about these attacks. So they might look at your press releases, job postings, your web page, and other things to find out what you might have that would be worth stealing and what your defenses are like, and then develop some kind of weapon and attack your network. So there are a lot of tools used to organize and look for techniques, and procedures. Yara is an open source tool that just looks for strings in malware. It's just a quick way to sort files into files involved in a certain attack. Once attackers have gained the ability to execute code on a system, which they typically do with phishing, they trick somebody into clicking on a link or running an attachment. Now they're able to run some malicious activity on a machine, but typically when that machine is rebooted, they'll lose control, so they try to attain persistence by putting some code to automatically restart, for example, a registry key. The most common Windows attack is dynamic link library sideloading, and we do this in the malware analysis and exploit development classes. This is how you typically do it. You trick a Windows software product into loading a malicious library. It's pretty easy to do. It's the most common way you get code execution on Windows machines. So when investigators, intrusion When incident response investigators find this, they will then try to remediate it. The first thing you do is try to contain it, which is stopping the attack from spreading by things like blocking IP addresses, taking systems offline, and so on. Then you'll generate indicators of compromise. And analyzing what's happening, you will find some clues of which machines are involved, like registry keys, files, network connections, and then you will scan the network to find all the machines involved, and then try to perform root cause analysis to figure out what weakness in your network allowed them in, so you can patch that and prevent attackers from coming in that way again. So indicators of compromise are anything you can easily find to tell that the attack has happened, like registry keys, network ports, things like the prefetch file, the master file table. That's what you look for, something that you can easily detect that will tell you that this system is compromised. So RAM, I mentioned before, RAM images is very important in incident response because usually the malware is running in RAM. It's often not on the hard drive, so the memory is the place to look for it. There's shim cache and am cache parsers are tools which record what applications have been running, and shell bags identify folders that have been opened. And the volume shadow copy has historical records of the way files used to be. So if files have been modified, you'll find old versions of files there, and that can help you find out what the attacker's been doing. So there's a lot of tools to help with this incident response process, but it often starts with network traffic analysis. All right, so let's try a Kahoot of that. That is lecture 8. So here's the Kahoot. All right, so what does the hosts file do? It does DNS resolution. I didn't mention it in the lecture, but this is true. This was the original way you resolved DNS names. There was just a host file that was distributed on floppy disks to people. It is still used in modern systems, although usually it's empty, and most of the resolution is done instead by DNS servers on the internet. But the host file is still there, and it's sometimes used to block spam and malware. All right, what device sends packets to every host on a network? That's what hubs do, although if you want to use proper Cisco terminology, what you ought to say is it sends all frames to every node on a network. Technically, packets are layer 3 and hosts are layer 3, and this operates at layer 1. But anyway, that's the point. Hubs, every frame of data is forwarded to every device it can reach. It doesn't understand the addresses or limit in any way. And that's what wireless networks do. You spray this, all your traffic goes out over non-directional radio to every device within range. The device you want to talk to and all the other devices get that data too. All right. All right, so which attackers often come from hostile military? CAPTs, Advanced Persistent Threats. All right, what phase of the attack communicates with an external server? To get instructions. That's command and control. Now, exfiltration, of course, involves sending data to an external server, but command and control is where it gets instructions from outside the network to make your machine into a bot under hostile control. All right. All right, root.